Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on Series 11, Episode 5 of Doctor Who, the Tsuranga Conundrum. And I already know from right out of the gate, because I mostly enjoyed this episode, especially coming on the coattails of the previous Arachnids in the UK, which I didn't wholly enjoy, and it seems like a lot of people actually had a really good time with. I can already hear that people were sort of down-thumbing this particular episode and not probably enjoying it as much as I did, which seems to be a reoccurring thing. There's always a couple of episodes from series to series of Doctor Who where I sort of go counterintuitive to the rest of the masses, the mass audience, where there's one that doesn't really sit well with me, I didn't really enjoy, and it seems to be a fan favorite, a lot of people really loved and enjoyed, and then there's one that I'll have enjoyed, per my own particular tastes, and that subjectivity is like out the window with the mass audience. They're like, oh, this was crap. This episode was ass, effectively. And for me, as I say, I mostly enjoyed this episode. There was one major overarching factor to the episode that sort of brought it down for me, and I'll touch upon that as I go through my sort of list that I have here of things that I was thinking of and impressions I got while watching this one. The first one, from straight out of the gate, was the arc in space, the classic Fourth Doctor serial. I was heavily reminded of that with the design of the Tsuranga, the ship. The very white, pristine sort of walls of the innards of this vessel and everything like that, and dealing with an alien creature kind of thing, run amok, and there was much more to it, to the arc in space. And, because that's a classic Doctor Who serial, the effects weren't exactly in support of the, intriguing nature of the story, if you go back and look at that one. But it was very interesting how sort of cut, from similar cloth that this particular episode was, in having a creature run amok on this vessel. At first you think it's like a space hospital or something, but not quite. It's ambulatory, but it's not an actual hospital, and it's just bringing patients where they need to go, in this case the space station Rhesus or whatever it was. And so from right out of the gate, I like a lot of what is going on with this modern series 11 this far. I'm getting a lot of throwback vibes and a lot of things that stand out to me and remind me of classic Who, and even throwbacks to the modern series, not very long ago. I just brought up, in fact, the Rhesus, space station. It looked very much reminiscent to me of the Platform 1 game station from Series 1 with the Ninth Doctor. And I actually was reminded of the Ninth Doctor as well, with this 13th Doctor's sort of exuberance and passion that came to the fore when looking at the antimatter drive that powered this vessel. Jodie, as the 13th Doctor in this episode, was spectacular from beginning to end. And there's also an aspect, like a minor gripe that I have with the way the episode finished out. She seems to be injured. She says something about her spleen or something like that, and she's got some sort of pain that's going on. And we don't really get a resolution of that. Like, she's still very much in pain by the end of the episode. Now, I can only assume, based on the trailer I saw for the next episode, that maybe that is an aspect that carries over. I don't know for sure. And I found myself already a little worried based on some of the dialogue and some of the way the Doctor was, like, holding her side, and she says something like, oh, I hope it's not that, like, I forget exactly what she said, but already I was like, oh, don't tell me she's already gonna be, like, staving off a regeneration cycle like the Fifth Doctor did in his final serial, and her time is already up. That kind of thing. Because I had started thinking, in dealing with this little alien creature, the Pating, as it was called, which I'm noting a lot of people seem to think was very reminiscent of Stitch from Lilo and Stitch. I've never actually seen that movie, as big of a Disney fan as I am. It actually more so reminded me of the little creatures you see in the movie Galaxy Quest, which is kind of like a parody homage to Star Trek and things like that. But in dealing with the creature and then coming around to understanding that it feeds off energy, energy, you know, like maybe she's going to call on regeneration energy and sacrifice herself or something, or, you know, to stave off this little alien creature. I didn't exactly know, but it was signaling to me already, like there was a red flag in the back of my mind, like, oh crap. Now, is this the first inkling of the end of the 13th Doctor's span of existence? You know, I have no idea. And as I say, it looks almost as though, if you look at the trailer for the next episode, Demons of Punjab or something along those lines, haven't exactly learned the title of it, but it looks like, you know, she's zapped by something, or she's holding her head and looks to be in pain, and it just gives me the impression, like, maybe, hopefully, my fingers are crossed, that whatever this injury was, it didn't just disappear without any further acknowledgement, because that has been a reoccurring theme all throughout Series 11 thus far. As I've had conversations with some of you guys in the comments back and forth, there have been things that were left unresolved from episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4 thus far, mostly surrounding the villain of each, you know, subsequent episode getting away, and just there being no real resolution. I mean, you look at Robertson in you know, Arachnids in the UK, and to a lesser sort of degree of ceremony, you know, unceremoniously, he just sort of, I'm gone, you know, so there was no real resolution there. And there hasn't been, like in episode 2 with the 2 space, you know, racers or whatever like that, like they just disappear. We don't really get a resolution or an official sort of goodbye. And so that's led a lot of people to speculate, oh, is this building towards something? Will these characters return in the future? Will it be a Sinister Six, you know, Legion of Doom band of villains to confront the Doctor and her companions later on? Or, you know, what's going on with that? And I don't know. I still do not necessarily subscribe to that actually being the direction, you know, things are taking, the Chib is taking things. But it just, you know, this is the latest aspect of something that comes across and seems to be a big deal in an episode, and it just kind of goes away. So is this going to be a point of weakening for the Doctor? Like maybe these villains come back and they're going to strike, and they're going to strike hard, and it's going to be a big deal because the Doctor's not at peak performance because of whatever this injury is, you know. I don't know. It's mystifying to me. Where was the resolution? Is it carrying on into the next episode? If it does, even though these episodes are supposed to be largely singular encapsulated stories, I'll forgive it a little bit if it ends up playing into the next episode. But if it doesn't, you couldn't have just passed off a line to say, oh, you'll be healed, and, you know, unless I missed it, unless I'm forgetting. I did just watch the episode, and I was taking notes the whole time, and you know, as I'm watching it, I'm jotting notes, so there's a chance I may have missed a line of dialogue where they said, oh, you'll be healed in no time, whatever. Another aspect that I was really reminded of while watching the episode, I've done a whole series of videos called Great Companions That Never Were in the History of Doctor Who. Mostly dedicated to background characters and things of that sort, guest starring actors and roles, going all the way back to the classic series, but very much embodying the modern as well, that were characters I thought were really intriguing and could have served potentially as a really cool addition to the Doctor's travels through time and space. And so I had done a video on the Series 8 12th Doctor episode Time Heist, about the 2 characters in that episode, Sai and Sabra. And I was sort of reminded of them looking at the nurse, you know, doctor, practitioner, nurse, whatever you want to call her, Mabley, in this episode, as well as the android Ronan. For some reason, like, I was already thinking, hey, there's my next, you know, Great Companions That Never Were. It's going to be Mabley and Ronan, you know. And it was because they so reminded me of Sai and Sabra from Time Heist. But for different reasons, I think they could have been really intriguing. I mean, we've already had an android, pseudo-android with Chameleon, short-lived, though he may have been. And then, of course, K9 in his own way and whatever like that. There's you know, like a Lieutenant Commander Data kind of thing that they could do, or you know, I did a video in the Great Companions That Never Were of the one android from the Androids of Death, the sort of good android, you know, and sort of explored aspects of storytelling they could have gone into, along those lines with an artificial life form, or like a nurse or a doctor, something along those lines. I mean, those were the topics of conversation in a couple of those great companions that never were videos as well. To sort of have a character to bound off our proper titular doctor, our resident Time Lord in time and space, and so I was thinking a lot of those kinds of things. I don't know if I will actually dedicate a video, Great Companions That Never Were, to Mabley and Ronan, maybe one day. But I feel like I would be rehashing a lot of my ideas in talking about, certain archetypes of, artificial life form, a doctor or nurse, and such like that, as I've mentioned in this video. And then actually speaking of being reminded of things, when it came to the sort of neural piloting interface in the episode, I found myself heavily reminded of Pacific Rim, even though it's kind of not like that. I mean, only one person Jackson in this case. It doesn't need, a dual piloting system as it does in that movie. Although we do see a brother and sister utilizing it at separate times, albeit in this episode. But I have to say, like, that was another sort of minor gripe. The doctor and the general, whatever she is, they leave the room and leave her brother to it. And then like seconds later, minutes later, he's already pseudo-concocted something on the fly. I mean, it's not impossible, but it did feel like, oh wow, he made that turnaround, concocted some sort of neural interface really quickly, even down to like the jack-in boots setup, that the general then has to go and like stand in. All the wiring and stuff, okay, yeah, you probably could have knocked that out of the park pretty quickly. But to have like stabilizing boots or holsters that the boots go into, like, it was how quick was that at the ready under the floorboards? I don't know. Was that a backup system they just didn't know about? I don't know. It seemed to go rather quickly. But as I say, it reminded me of Pacific Rim and the whole fact that we're dealing with a brother and sister. A lot of the characterization in the episode was pretty spot on. As I say, with the doctor herself, she was exuberant and passionate, all the while cradling her side, being injured, and being aware of the dangers of this creature, but being sort of out of her element. I like when the doctor is confronted with something that he or she doesn't necessarily immediately recognize, and that was very much the case with the Pating. She didn't know anything about the Pating, and so that learning curve, it was less of an issue for me than it was like in episode 2, where I said my own personal criticism was that the doctor felt like fish out of water, like out of her element to a degree, even more so than usual. Whereas here, she was actively pursuing the mystery in a way that just engaged with me a lot better. It could have been the backdrop, a spaceship in space, being confined to it, and corridor running and everything, dealing with the interesting little creature and all that kind of stuff. Like, it just rubbed me much better than episode 2 had in series 11 thus far, as far as the doctor's characterization. But again, Graham and Ryan come to the fore, Ryan especially, in the conversation he has with Yaz about the disparaging relationship he has with his father, and it really came to the fore. This is the major gripe, and the major thing I could have probably done without it in the episode, was the male alien who was pregnant. And that was borderlining a little bit too much goofiness to me, and I couldn't necessarily take it straight-faced or at face value, and it did sort of almost dangerously skirt the line of like these religious movements who are against adoption and things like that. They want to force somebody who is impregnated, who's going to have a baby, to keep the baby. It's not so much anti-abortion, because that is a big issue, of course, and one long and oft debated, but there are groups that are even that much further. They go to the nth degree, and even if it's an unwanted child, a child resultant from rape or something, they try to force upon the mother, or father, or whatever it is, keep the child, keep it, that kind of thing. And there were just hints of that. But of course, playing devil's advocate, and I was actively thinking this while watching this is something really personally related to who Ryan is and how he was raised, or in this case, wasn't, by his father. He doesn't have that relationship with his father. And so he was coming from a very personal point of view, like, be a dad to this child, don't be so quick to give it up. And so I did feel somewhat sympathetic toward that. But it's the first time in this series thus far, barring the Robertson character being a caricature of Donald Trump in the previous episode, where I felt that it was risking getting dangerously close to preaching. And I was trying not to like format my mind to that. You know, I was trying to take it at the value of the characterization, you know, what Ryan had gone through and where he was coming from in trying to support this man having this child and wanting this man to be the child's father and everything. Although the whole avocado thing kind of went over my head, you know, in the end. Other than fish out of water aliens and you know, not really understanding, you know, minced words being there because, you know, our time team, our TARDIS travelers are very much out of time, out of their usual time and place. But, you know, apart from that, I mean, that was the major sort of gripe I had of the episode. Because I couldn't really take it seriously, wholeheartedly, and even though it did play into Ryan's characterization as much as it did, it felt wonky to me, and not necessarily something that was needed in the story, in the plotting of the episode. Everything else I thoroughly enjoyed. All of the other characterization I thoroughly enjoyed. The fact that the general was hiding an illness from her nearest and dearest, from her brother, the sibling rivalries that were there, which the Doctor loved. You know, siblings, bless. And such like that. I mean, everything, the characterization of Ryan, once again, Graham in his own way, trying to sort of get to know the General's brother and you know, try to get him to open up a little bit, feel less singled out, because, of course, the General had Ronan the android as her, you know, consigliere or whatever you want to call it. And everything was pretty much on point. Even Yaz, you know, being given the little that she was given to do in this episode, I daren't hope, I'm really hopeful that the next episode, being that it's going to relate once again to her familial ties, or at least generationally speaking, her ancestors, her great-grandmother, whatever it is, that more of her character will come to the fore finally. You know, I feel like she's been a little bit shortchanged, even though she has had things to do from episode to episode. I just feel like the characterization has much more been emphasizing Graham and Ryan and even the Doctor to a degree, and I just feel like they haven't really been there that much convincingly for Yaz as a character thus far, even though we met her family in the previous episode. So I'm hoping in the next one she's really going to come to the fore. We're going to see, you know, Yaz blossom and glow, and it's going to be really resounding as much as it has been. Because especially, you know, like her performance in the dialogue between she and Ryan in this episode, her sorrow and burgeoning awareness of what Ryan went through, finding his mother dead the way she had died and everything like that. You know, Mandip Gill's performance there was spectacular. I mean, you know, even though she and Ryan aren't the closest of compatriots, there's a friendship, there's a kinship between them because of the mess they find themselves in, traveling all of time and space with the Doctor, but also the fact that they knew each other in their, you know, younger days and everything. So they're more easily relatable than, say, Ryan and Graham are because of that tumultuous aspect between them. And I really loved her performance, and I really, really want an episode dedicated to her. I want more time spent with her, more time getting to know her, as we have had with Graham and Ryan and such like that. And I hope we're going to get that with the next episode. But that pretty much is my thoughts in a nutshell for this particular episode, the Tsuranga Conundrum. And I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of it. If you've seen it as well, love or hate it, anything goes. Of course, feel free to let me know if I'm out of my mind, and it's strictly a subjective taste issue that I happen to really mostly enjoy this one, and y'all probably hated it. It's probably the worst one for you of the season thus far. And whatever like that. I already saw a review that said as much. And I'd also like to ask at this point, if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future from my channel, please consider supporting my channel by looking at my PayPal contribution link, which will be linked both in the description and the comments below. You have options you can look into as far as setting up a monthly contribution, a one-time only kind of thing. You can send me a personal message along with a contribution, requesting topics I may discuss in the future, or for shout-outs or anything like that. And so yeah, with that, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.